Hey guys, Jessica Henry here. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how I do this rubbing out technique of this method of painting portraits. These are some examples of portraits I have done, as well as a horse painting I did using this exact same technique. In today's video, this is the picture that we will be doing. Hey guys, Jessica Henry here. I am excited to invite you back to my studio today. We're going to work on a very simple portrait today. What I want to do is just talk about laying the foundations in of a portrait, getting the drawing accurate, and then working on the values. So you won't be seeing much of my palette today. It's going to be kind of on my lap, leaning against the easel. And I'm just going to use burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. I may use a little bit of white and yellow ochre towards the end. But for the most part, I'm just going to focus on the drawing and getting the values right. So that is our emphasis today, getting a likeness in a portrait. So I'm working on an 8x10 linen panel today. This is a photograph of my daughter, Abigail. Okay, so I get a little bit of Gamsol on my paintbrush, and I'm grabbing a little bit of sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue, just making a nice runny mixture here. This is what I'm going to use to tone my canvas. Just putting it's a little darker than I need because I'm going to wipe some of it off because I do not want that slick surface on there. And I really do enjoy doing this with a linen canvas rather than cotton, because cotton is just very porous and deeply textured. And I prefer to paint on a smoother surface, especially this is oil primed, and it just kind of creates a nicer finish. Okay. I'm just gonna, and this color really does matter because I'm just gonna be working with this. I'm not really applying a whole lot of color and skin tones to this, so I'm kind of basing this choice off of what I see in there in my photograph, my reference. Okay, so cleaning that spot on my palette. Like I said, I've got my palette down below here on my lap. Okay, so getting a smaller brush, still kind of slick. Just getting a little bit thinner, a little bit thicker mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And what I want to do first on here is decide where my boundaries are for the painting. So I'm taking into consideration the top and bottom, and she's kind of looking off to the left, so I want to take that into consideration too. I think if I put her face at about this general size on here, just roughly putting in the oval, giving myself those boundaries to work within. And unfortunately, that picture there was cropped. This was a photo my daughter took years ago, and so she was playing with some of the things on the computer with editing and so forth. So I'm missing some of her cranium, but that's okay. I can just kind of let some of those edges go off. So I think if her chin is about here, that allows some space on this side, but more on this side. And a slightly bit off-centered portrait is more interesting than just right in the middle. Okay. So now I'm going to work on figuring out where the dividing line is. Now, she was about 12 in this picture. Even though she's a child, it does appear that her eye line is just about right in the middle. However, like I said, there's part of her skull and cranium that's missing. So I'm going to take that into account and put her eye line just slightly below center. About like that. And now I'm going to divide this lower portion in half and assume that's roughly where her nose is. And her mouth will be at about this area, and then the bottom of the chin. I can check all those measurements in a little bit. But for now, that's just what I'm going to go with. And I'm not worried about the actual location of where her neck is and so forth and that. Okay, now her eye line is not perfectly straight, so I'm going to just tip it a little bit. But since I'm going to tip it, then everything else needs to be slightly tipped too. Just a little. Okay, now her eyes. This is obviously our dominant eye. And what I want to do at this point is start mapping out where the eye sockets are in this in her face. I'm going to start from here and then I'll work down and up. So it doesn't have to be, I'm not worried about the actual eye yet, but I do want to get the eye socket shape in there accurately. And then, in fact, you don't really see much of it on this side because this is all in shadow, so I'm just going to map out on here where that shadow piece begins. Down the nose. Put a little bit darker value over all of this. And then we can, into this, we'll just sculpt out where things are. I'm going to take some of this paper towel here and wipe out that piece of information for her nose, because I know that that's about the boundary of her nose, so I will double check all that later. But for now, by putting that piece of value here, it was affecting the overall illusion that I'm looking for with this white piece. And so let's just kind of sculpt that out a little bit there too. More value over here. It's okay if it just goes off into whatever would be hair. And then the mouth comes down. I'll work on those subtleties of the chin values and things when we get to that. Okay, and then we've got what will become her neck shadow there. So that is the realm of what we have to work with. All right, now coming back over here to sculpt out where that eye socket is on this shadow side, and I know it's probably going to be hard for you to see on there, but I will do what I can to show you that. And then the temple, I want to try to isolate the width of the face right away in my painting, because right at the temple, watch that distance from where the eye ends to the edge of the face. That seems to be one of the #1 areas that get distorted. So while I'm looking at that on this side, I'm just going to clean that passage up right there. And that the hair here is kind of framing that side of the face, so we're going to let that do its job right there. And as you saw, I like to tear off a chunk of my paper towel and use that as an eraser to sculpt out where things are going to go. Like that. And just wipe away the paint. That's what I got to do there. My socket shapes like this. And then this one, the edge of her temple over here is about in this area, like this. So then her socket comes down over here. All right, now I'm gonna just kind of pop in a general location of where her eyes are. So inside the eye socket, I'm doing the top line first. Remember, her head is tipped a little, so we'll give it a little bit of a, watch that angle there. And they don't have to be, you don't have to take at this time all the time and fussing and you know, getting really finicky with all of the information in the eyes. Right now it's a matter of just placement. Just want to get them where they're going to sit in the orbital cavity here. Okay, so I'm going to take and wipe some of that lower part of the eye socket out. And the eyebrow connects to this shadow. And then we've got this highlight in here. Very defining of that interior passage of the orbital cavity. Okay, so like that. Okay, so now we have pretty much the eyes sitting in their eye sockets. And then I'll be able to come back through there and work on that. That's going to be fun. I'm kind of excited about that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is start to take measurements. So I'm going to assume this eye in the light is what I call truth. And I want that to be accurate and as clearly defined as I can. Start and stops. So this is where it begins and this is where it ends inside there. So that, with that one eye measurement, I'm going to take and measure over to make sure that I have this information going on correct. So I'm taking my thumb and the tip of my brush. That's my one eye. And I'm coming over here in between. And my thumb, this is going on the corner of this eye. And the tip of my brush is going on the corner of the first eye. Okay, so in between, we have about exactly one eye in between the eyes. And then this one over here. So I'm going to come and check. Okay, so we have, this is actually going to be exactly the same size. So that is, right there is one eye. And there is the other eye. And it's okay to make a mark. That little mark there was for that eye. So I'll make sure to bring this nose, or this eye in a little bit to the nose. And that's about where that one should start. And wipe my brush off. Make it end over there. Okay, so since it's the same size, I'm just going to measure the width going all the way across from where the hair starts on this side to the temple on this side. Okay, and that is that exact width. So how close am I over here? That's where the hair starts, and I'll have to bring it in just a little bit. Just like that. And then the hair comes down like this. So taking my paper towels, I'm going to wipe that down to there. Okay, so there we have the beginning of that portrait. Okay, now how far down is the nose? I want to work my way down the face. So I'm going to take this measurement from, let's go to the bottom of the nose right there, angling it up to the corner of her eye right there. Okay, coming over here, I put my thumb on the corner of her eye, and I can kind of scratch that area with my brush. That is where the bottom of her nose is, right there. Okay, so everything else has to fit in there. Cleaning my brush off very well and then wiping it on my paper towel so that I don't feel any more of the Gamsol in my bristles. I'm using this now to help sculpt out where the information is for that nose, by just taking away some of the initial layer of my painting, that toned canvas, using it as an eraser, the Gamsol. So wiping my brush off, coming up and cleaning that whole passage in there. And that is where the nose is. I may come back in there and add a little bit of white just to really highlight the nose passage in there. But you can pick up a little pigment like this and almost like a pencil just sort of soften and blend that around. Oh, I wiped out too much. It's important to know on your brush how much pigment versus chemical is on the bristles. Okay, back on track. Now there's a little value running down from her eye down to where the nose meets this plane of the face. So I'm going to just put a little bit of that in right now. And that is not quite accurate, but I'm going to come back and reshape it just a bit. So her sinus cavity is a little wider, so I'll shave that back. And then it comes up in here. So all the time I'm looking for these values that are identifying her shape and this lighter passage on her nose. And then her nostril is about in here. So we'll just put a little dab for that. And we'll get one over here too. You want to make sure not to make them too dark and too round, or they'll tend to look piggy. So just keep them very soft. Okay. And then over here, there's a stronger, brighter. I'm going to clean my brush off. Wipe it very well. And on this cheek, we have it almost down to the white of the canvas. So let's rub that really well. And this is one of those techniques where you wouldn't want to have your canvas toned ahead of time because you're going to be rubbing out pigment. Just put this, a little bit of value on this up here while I'm thinking about it. Just a little. The reason I'm doing this right now is because this value being too light is affecting the intensity of this value down here. Okay, so we're coming up, we've got a little darker value patch right here. We can just add that with just a touch like that. Very subtle shifts every now and then. Okay, now moving down under her nose. I want to work on the lower part of under her nose. We've got the dip right here, the Cupid's bow. And I'm comparing this value in the middle here to what's going on around it. And it's fairly dark, but I don't want to make it too dark or it can look stripy. And I'll come back through here and work on some of the values over here a little bit more too. And we seem to have lost this nostril over here. Always maintaining these three parallels. Those, the eye, the nose, and the mouth. So this nostril was down a little too far. Okay. Now before I get into the mouth, I'm going to sculpt out a little bit more of the nose and cheek on this side. So this value here, I want to push this a little bit more. And it comes down. We're always thinking about painting being more in terms of sculpting rather than drawing. If you can think about this as having more of a three-dimensional feeling rather than, instead of drawing it on with the pencil, we sculpt it with paint. It'll have more of that three-dimensional appeal and illusion. So getting this value over here a little bit darker and the side of her nose here. And then there is a passage up here in her forehead that is a continuation of this darker area on the side of her face. And then over on this side, it starts to get a little bit lighter as the face turns and the wall light is hitting her face. So at this point, there's very little thinner in the pigment that I'm putting on the canvas. It's just mostly paint, but I am wiping a lot of it off my brush every now and then, because you don't want to get it too loaded. And also be thinking about the angle that you are holding your brush. So I'm putting brush strokes on in the form of the way the face has its own topography. And that'll give it another sculptural dimension. Okay, so we've got this coming down on this side. It's a little darker than what I put down initially, but let's be cognizant of that over here. Wiping my brush off, just in order to move the pigment around a little bit. Okay, so now we're getting down to the place where we are going to be working on the mouth. little more. So now the mouth, oh, I want to fuss on this, but we can't. I'll come back and work on that some more. Okay, the mouth, I just take, and over here, I'm going to draw a line straight down or up from the corner of this mouth, and I look to see where it hits that eye. Straight up and down. And if you're not sure if your brush is extremely vertical, check it, compare it with the edge of your paper. Just watch that. Okay, so it hits that eye right in the middle. So I come over here, and right in the middle of that eye, I draw the line down. Same with on this side. Where is this mouth? And I look for all these verticals. The corner of that mouth almost hits the corner of the nose, which hits the corner of the eye up there. So coming over here, the corner of her eye, down like that. So her mouth is going to be in here. But that doesn't answer the question, how far down and away from the nose is the corner of that mouth. So I'm going to use my eye here, since this was my truth, and I get that measurement again, and I'm going to compare it with putting my thumb on the edge of her nose and the tip of my brush on the corner of her mouth. And I see that that distance is the same as from the edge of her nose here to there. So getting that measurement again on here. And I check that angle. You can make a mark with your brush. So that's where the corner of her mouth is. Right there. And then the other one we determined is there. And since we know that we've got these three parallels, I'm going to work on getting this, just connecting the dots. This one to that one. Okay. Now I know I'm going to have to bring this chin down a little more because it's not quite the right place. So I dip my brush in the Gamsol and I erase, just going down like that. Okay. So we have the mouth in the right location, but now I'm just going to double check different, cleaning up different areas in here. So our cheek comes down like this, and the mouth is right here, and the corner of this other side is over here. And then under the chin we've got some value here, so I'm just going to put that kind of back in. So if you like and you're enjoying these some of these portrait things I've been doing lately, we are in the portrait section of our Renaissance Academy, and we're just about to wrap up the whole year, but you know, you can join at any time, and we're having a great time. This was our first year, and it has been phenomenal in the Academy, and really just wonderful people, wonderful camaraderie. A lot of learning going on, really enjoying it. Okay, so I am going to switch now to a smaller brush, and this one is just a Walmart brush, but I like this one and I've used it so many times. It kind of has sort of a filbert shape, but they're stiff synthetic bristles. So I'm just picking up the same pigment that I had, and I like it because I can come in here now and get a little bit more of the finer details. And I can still move the paint around a little more. So coming up in here, just want to get the feeling of the bone structure under her mouth here a little bit more accurate. So right here, there's a highlight, dipping my brush in the Gamsol, wiping it off, and then it acts as an eraser, just by rubbing it like that. And then I have the slight value shift coming up to the edge of the nose. And then right here, where the center part of the nose comes down, it's picking up a highlight because we have the light coming from this way. So I'm just really want to be cognizant of where those bright lights are on this. So wiping my brush off very well. And doing this technique, you really want to get familiar with if you dip your brush in the Gamsol, how much do you have to wipe off to still get certain effects? So be aware of how much paint and how much thinner is on your brush at all times. So I even hold this right up here so I can really just get at this easily, like that. Clean it off, because the pigment does work itself into the bristles, so you have to clean it regularly. And rub that up there. I love this photo image for its clean sculptural simplicity. Wow, that's loud. And I'm going to take out some of the information in her eye, and you can see just as I start to really play with some of these pieces of information around her eye, keeping this right here. It's just a matter of moving pigment around. Picking up a little pigment. Wipe the brush off, moving and erasing some pigment. She's looking pretty much right at us, so I want that direct gaze. And wipe. And then right here in the middle of the eye socket, it's a little bit darker right here. Not as dark as I have it. So I'm always comparing and gauging the value that I see with values that are around it. So pick up a little pigment for her eyebrow. And I want to make sure that there aren't any hard, crisp edges except where I want them. And in most cases on a portrait, especially a portrait of a child, there just are hardly any at all. Hard edges. So who knew that these cheap Walmart brushes could be such a supplier of art material? And I'll put that value back in there. That was there. There was a shadow here. But I'm flicking my eye back and forth to the photo all the time. Being aware of that. And as it comes down and around here, and there's not much of a separation there where her hair meets her face. That value is very, very similar to that. But we have a little bit of a highlight coming up to her eye, not that much. And then where the socket turns over here, there's a brighter light on the edge of the nose. Now, as you noticed, I got the main components laid in, and I'm coming back through here now and working on the finer details. So I'll come back through even after that and then work on the outside things as well. Bringing in a little bit more of a value here where this is a strong edge break. And I want to be careful to not use this brush the whole time, because as I move away from the smaller detail areas, using a small brush will start to look scratchy and dabbity-dab-dab. You don't want to do that. And then right on the ball of the nose, there's a slight value shift where the light, it kind of flattens out a little bit, so there's a little bit of a value change here. Just want to be aware of that. checking that eye. You'll see I jump around quite a bit, coming back to different things. But that's okay. That's how you get a better sense of unity in your painting too, by moving around. And a soft, soft touch. You don't need to, you have to learn how to be very delicate with your handling here. You don't want to be too heavy-handed. And then as this starts to come down, it's a little bit darker right by the nose, and then it turns because the teeth are under the skin here. So I'm wiping my brush off and letting this be a stronger, brighter white. And always be managing it. Looks like I need a new paper towel. And just like that. And I've got a slight bit where her lip comes up. And be careful not to make the value of the lips too dark. They can get away from you and look kind of lipsticky, especially on children. You don't want to do that. Children or men. Men typically, don't care to have their lips really defined like that. So you keep it very soft, keep that edge there very muted. And it makes lips look softer when they're not really strongly outlined. And I'm softening that edge with the Cupid's bow in there. Always thinking about sculpting. If you've been following my YouTube channel for a while, you'll see that I do tend to paint my daughter quite a bit. This is Abby, and she is the one who went to the Army boot camp this summer. She's in the reserves and doing great. She's would like to make a career out of being some sort of trauma surgeon in the military. She's learning Arabic and taking classes. She's already speaking Italian, French, and Spanish. Smart girl. She'll do it. So we'll see. College next year. And then I'm just taking some of this dry brush and wiping out where the edge of that nostril over there is. And this nostril's the wrong shape. Clean your brush off. Sometimes you just get too much pigment in the bristles, so you have to really make sure that you clean it frequently. And then this comes down. And we'll erase a little bit for the other side of this Cupid's area. I had to bring that up a little. It's important to not let this get too dark, especially on females, because it can look mustachy. So I'm just lifting that value out a little bit. Okay. Now this value here, where the mouth does kind of that tucked in smile, That can be nice and dark. So get that nice and dark in there. And right there at the where the lip does its tucked in fold. And then we soften that where it comes down this way. Okay, now the lower lip, again, is picking up more of that, oops, light. I don't want to use ultramarine blue. I'm just using some sienna for this. Still too dark. Clean the brush off. You can erase. Now I'm just moving what pigment I had put on there. Okay, so we're going to let this edge right here where the light is hitting it, hitting the corner of the lips, be really soft. We're just going to lose that right to the background. Now, being cognizant of her teeth, the bone structure of the lower jawline right here, we have a highlight where it's stronger because that's where the lower canines down here are turning that muzzle area. So I just try to pay attention to that feature. And then I'm going to soften this whole passage where the chin meets the highlight meets the shadow. Keeping that very soft in here. And I'm also watching, I have the angle here a little bit off, so cleaning my brush, and I'm going to reshape the jawline. And it turns about here. And angles outward a little. And I don't want that sharp line, but I do want the hair accent right here, which is defining that feature, that line. So that gave us a soft, or that defining line, but I'm going to soften it a little so that it's not really harsh. Okay, now coming over here to the shadow side of the mouth, we have the mouth coming up, tucking in over there, as well as the lower part of the mouth. And just define that with a darker shadow. Okay, now I'm going to do a little bit of definition here, and it is just with the slightest value shift. I wipe my brush off, and I want to show a little lighter tone above the mouth, because again, same with on this side, it curves and we have more light hitting it. This side over here curves a little, and we have the light hitting it from down below, and I'm fixing that nose over there. It's a little weird shape. Anything in shadow is going to have a very soft edge. You don't want anything really strong, strongly defined and sharp in the shadow, because shadows are continuity, they're roundness, and if you have a sharp edge, it suggests a feeling of flatness, and so we don't want that. that, and then we bring it down. This passage under here where the jaw over here turns and goes under is pretty dark, so we're going to let that just sort of live down there in darkness. But the chin now is getting a little bit more light bounced up in here, so we're going to let some of that come through. It gives it that sense of reflected light too. I like that. Okay. And then down around here. Okay, now I'm going to come back in and just really focus on the eyes. And I really want to get this one because this is our star of the show. And I want my paint here a little bit thinner. So again, coming in and just cleaning this up. Putting in my darker anchors in this eye. Whatever creases, if I need them. The corner of the eye. And then wiping out my brush very well, I'm going to scoop out where the white of the eye is. I don't want to add a piece of white paint to it because I think that it would be too white. It's surprising how very not white the whites of the eyes are. And I really don't like this sharp edge, so I'm going to soften that with a clean brush. Pretty much clean, I just wipe it off. I want that eyelash just sort of curl back that way. And the iris isn't quite in the right place. That looks better. Cleaning this off. Now I'm going to get really tiny and just pull out a little bit stronger light hitting this eye. Okay, I feel good about that. Let me just clean this one up over here a little bit more. And that has just a slight value shift where the white of the eye is over there. It's just really slight. All right, now I'm going to work on getting some of the hair in place and the forehead. And it's okay to, I'm still just using this dumb little brush. But this will help frame in the face a little bit more, get some of that likeness. And it comes up around this way. And back to my bigger brush. So this is all dark over here. I'll just give it, since I don't really have that much information for it on that side, I'm going to use a little bit of linseed oil. Since if I added thinner, it would just lighten it. But that has to be darker than her face, so that is going in there like that. And I'm just going to bring it right down to under her chin because she's wearing a black turtleneck. So we will let that just be very dark down there. And then the neck, since we're on that, I just draw a line straight up from the edge of where I see it on here and see where it hits on both sides of the face. So on this side, I know that it's about where that eye hit, and on this side, it was about on the corner of that eye. So that's going to be in about that area. So softening that. So even though there's really no light hitting her shirt, I'm going to put a little bit, just a slighter value change on it so that we have some differentiation there. I'll soften that like that. I don't want that edge there really sharp on the shadowed side of her face. Okay. Oops. No. I still want to do her hair a little bit more. Now again, I don't have her cranium up there, so I'm going to assume it to be about and sometimes you might be working with a photo that doesn't have all the information or the values are off or whatever, and you have to make those adjustments as you're going along. I'm going to put this whole background we're just going to go that way. Darken that a little. And get a little bit bigger brush because I think that this is kind of fun where I'm going with this. I like this. I am making my background here a little bit darker so that I can offset sort of this illusion of the light hitting over here. Okay. So, wiping that off, and like I said, I'm going to grab a little bit of yellow ochre. At the beginning I mentioned some of that. So I am pulling in a little yellow ochre and sienna into this area here where her hair is, and then up here where I feel there should be a little bit of color shift. Let's grab some white and yellow ochre. And right where I have the shadow meeting the light, I'm going to add a little bit of the white and yellow ochre to that. And now, where it's really strong, I don't want to make this all about the hair, so I don't want to add too much information to it. So I'm just going to keep it suggested, white and yellow ochre. Just about like that. Nothing major. All right, now there are a few things I want to do to her face just a little bit before I wrap this up. And I really wanted to hit some of these stronger values a little bit more. So while I have this white and yellow ochre mixture on here, I'm going to come back in through here and just define some of those stronger areas. And I do believe that my canvas here had a fold or something in it. And when you have canvas that has a little bit of a damage, it can affect and take the paint differently. So just watch out for that. I didn't know that when I started this, but anyway, you can cover it over. If you're going to do some more application of paint, just put a little bit thicker paint on there and it'll be fine. So I'm taking a little bit of yellow ochre and white and applying it where I see a brighter passage, and then I will come through at the very end and just put a little bit stronger light on it where I see the bright areas. Watching this curve here. And I'm going to just soften this edge, wipe my brush off, and drag that right along there. Okay, now for that stronger white that I talked about, just white. And down here on her jaw. And I don't want to make it too stripy, so I'm just going to kind of soften where that's supposed to hit. Under her nose, this part in here where it was really getting that brighter note. I'll wipe my brush off and really just kind of lose some of that there. A little bit brighter note right here. And I really do want this on her cheek quite a bit brighter than what I have. So just taking and laying it in, thinking about the angle of her cheek here. All right, double checking. I've got some passages in here where the angle's off, so we're gonna pull that in a little. And her forehead needs more value work on it. It is amazing how if you don't get the values right, it really can affect the likeness of your person. You may actually have the drawing accurate, but if the values are off, then it can really change the whole look of things. So I'm pushing this a little darker. I don't want to go too blue, because blue can really tend to look kind of not the right. It doesn't look like skin tone. Pulling out the shadow on the top of her head. So that, I'm going to wrap this up. I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining me. And again, if you're interested in any of the different things that I was mentioning about the Renaissance Academy and just whatever information, I'm going to post it down below in the links. And so take a look. Also, I know some of you have mentioned being interested in the different workshops that I'm offering. And the Ireland workshop has 5 spots left. And so we're very excited about that. That is going to be happening in July 1 through 5. 1st to the 5th of 2019. So go ahead and click on the links below if you're interested, and we've got a whole lot of other workshops planned, as well as we're going to be starting up year 2 of the Renaissance Academy. So yeah, we got a lot of stuff happening next year and really excited about it. All right, you guys, that wraps us up. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, go ahead and like and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments section. All right, you guys, thanks so much. Bye-bye.